Oh, wow.
Denzel said to me a few minutes ago, he said, at your highest moment, be careful, that's when the devil comes for you.
They said Denzel Washington never loses his cool, until now. What if we told you that Hollywood's calmest man reportedly swung first? That's what insiders are whispering after a backstage confrontation between Denzel and Will Smith turned ugly. So ugly that people close to them say it wasn't just anger, it was betrayal. Imagine the same man who once prayed over Will after the Oscar slap, now shoving him against a wall and demanding to know if he'd been played. The whispers say Denzel found out something that made him realize the friend he'd defended might have dragged him into a scandal so dark, it's making even Hollywood veterans turn silent.
You seemed a little dazed afterwards, I'm not gonna lie.
No, I was gone, dude. You know, that was a rage that had been bottled for a really...
What's wild is how fast this allegedly exploded. 1 second, we're watching another awards season wrap up, and the next, YouTube clips are lighting up with chatter that Denzel, yes, that Denzel, lost his cool over Will. And the rumor is not just about a fight. People are saying Denzel feels personally betrayed, that his patience snapped because he once publicly defended Will, even prayed with him after the infamous Oscar slap. And now, he thinks Will might be playing a deeper game. We saw Denzel talk about that moment once, referencing spiritual warfare and saying, "Who are we to condemn?" A quote that's been clipped and repurposed nonstop on socials. At the time, it felt like grace under fire, a big brother helping a peer through a misstep. But now? In gossip circles, it's being framed as Denzel regretting that entire intervention, like he thinks he vouched for someone with a darker side.
A violinist is suing Will Smith, claiming retaliation after he alleges that he was fired for reporting harassment while on tour with Smith. Brian King Joseph filed the lawsuit in California earlier this week, accusing Smith of deliberately grooming him for exploitation.
And here's where it gets messy, because this story doesn't sit still. A whole network of claims and lawsuits have resurfaced or gained attention recently. A touring musician filed a complaint against Will Smith and his company, alleging grooming and wrongful termination tied to events on a major tour in early 2025, and that's circling around feeds as evidence that Will's personal behavior might be problematic. Again, there are legal documents and filings, that's a fact, but the commentary around them is already taking on a life of its own. People online are connecting dots that legal professionals haven't even acknowledged, and that's exactly why the gossip machine is revving its engines right now. Denzel, in some corners of the internet, is being cast not just as a mentor, but as someone who feels he accidentally vouched for someone who isn't what he seemed. And yes, there are even louder whispers, internet loud, about Will's relationships over the years, some of them driven by claims from former associates. Some of these claims are graphic, some are explosive, and some are completely unsupported beyond a name dropped in a viral podcast clip. Here's the important part. In this narrative, we're reporting the existence of those rumors as rumors, not presenting them as facts. People are talking about them, memes are being made, commentators are hyping them up, and that's why Denzel's supposed reaction has taken on this almost mythic, dramatic context online.
For retraction and false defamatory statements. This is from the Hirsch, Litchison, Young, and Polk.
This letter is filled with a bunch of lies and falsehood. In that letter, it says that
This office represents Willard C. Smith II. It has come to our attention that you recklessly and maliciously spread out white lies about our client and his wife in an interview published on or about November 8th on YouTube and again November 14th on 2023 interview on Instagram. And each of these two interviews amongst an avalanche.
So while the documented events are that Denzel once publicly spoke about Will's Oscars moment in spiritual terms and that the violinist lawsuit exists, the gossip augmentation of this story fills in all the rest with speculation, outrage, and insider say. For instance, there's chatter that Will's former assistant has promised to come forward with evidence of another actor's involvement with Will years ago. And social feeds are conflating that with Denzel's ire as if it's all part of a single narrative arc. Again, there's no verified proof of those claims, just clips and social shares. But in the court of public opinion, that's enough to make a scandal feel current and urgent. And we have to talk about context because the rumor stew isn't just about one backstage quarrel. Stories about Will's marriage, separation revelations from his spouse's memoir, and commentary about how private life should or shouldn't remain private have all resurfaced. Ironically, what was once a tightly controlled public image has fractured under the weight of multiple lawsuits and claim threads, and the chatter around Denzel's reaction feeds off that fragmentation. People are saying, if even Denzel is done, then something's really off. That's the emotional hook retweeted over and over, not a legal finding, not a verified quote, but a sentiment being pushed as truth in collective feeds. And people are reacting. On message boards, we're seeing disbelief. And on comment threads, we're seeing believers and skeptics duke it out. Some fans refuse to believe Denzel could be mad at Will at all, saying this is just gossip with no foundation. Others, and this is where the story gets juicy, are suggesting that there must be something under the surface, that the public hasn't seen yet, and thus the alleged backstage tension becomes symptomatic of a larger cover-up. That phrasing, larger cover-up, is exactly what turns a simple backstage disagreement into a sprawling conspiracy theory with multiple tentacles.
Yeah, and let me just say this. It's ridiculous. Right?
Now let's talk about the pace of all this. It's not slow. Clips of Denzel's old quotes about grace and the devil are being re-uploaded with ominous music. Clips of the lawsuit filings about the violinist are being discussed late into the night on live streams. And the rumor about the former assistant's claims has been repeatedly shared as the truth Will doesn't want you to know. Even though legal representatives have denied those specific claims, branding them as fabricated, that hasn't stopped social feeds from amplifying them. That's exactly how this feels present day to anyone scrolling trends, like a scandal that's actively evolving minute by minute. But here's the part that really adds tension. Amidst all of this chatter, Denzel has gone quiet. There are no public statements from him addressing any backstage altercation, and that silence, because this is where rumor culture thrives, is being spun as meaning something. On Reddit threads and TikTok comment storms, people interpret silence as guilt, as brewing anger, as a sign that there's a story bigger than what's been reported. It's fascinating how quickly narrative fills the gaps left by absence of comment, especially when it's two megastars like this, and the thread includes spiritual betrayal angles, long-time friendships gone sour, and whispers of deeper misconduct. And then there's Will's own very public responses to unrelated controversies, denying certain claims, legal representatives calling allegations false, and a segment of the rumorosphere calls that defensive tone proof that there's something to hide. That's how it spreads. A legal dismissal becomes, in the social narrative, a sign of deeper truth being suppressed. Again, that's not something we're asserting as fact here. It's how people are reacting and talking, and that's what's making this feel urgent and breaking to anyone watching from the outside. So in the backdrop of this swirling gossip storm, picture this. Mainstream outlets report a lawsuit filed by a touring musician alleging grooming and wrongful termination tied to a major celebrity's tour. That's a real document filed in a court. At the same time, social chatter is reframing that document with inflammatory interpretations and unverified claims about personal conduct. Denzel Washington, a figure with decades of respect, is suddenly thrown into the conversation not because he's legally involved, but because the rumor narrative says he might have been misled. That's how the scandal feels present, how each new clip or claim feels like part of a story that's still being written, and why people aren't letting this narrative go.
My feelings for him are just sadness. I feel sorry for somebody who was a young man in a industry who I believe was completely violated and used by people without, his permission, and he had to just go with it because these were powerful men, and in doing so he was promised more acting gigs, more career gigs, and none of that ever came. He was angry, upset, and it went down a very problematic route of substances, aggression, being charged, being arrested for bad things that he was.
What makes this particularly addictive, and what the rumor mill is feasting on, is the interplay of real documented events with wild internet amplification. We have the Oscars slap and Denzel's response from years ago, which are documented. We have legal filings, which are documented. We have the former assistant's statements, which have been widely circulated, and the legal team's denial. What isn't documented is any backstage fight between Denzel and Will, and yet so many feeds are treating that as fact. That's the shock factor. The alleged fight happened only in the realm of social commentary, repeated by insiders on live streams with zero official confirmation. And still, people are clicking, because it feels like something enormous is happening right now. And the emotional energy around it isn't neutral either. There's incredulity. Denzel would never. There's suspicion. Something bigger is being hidden. There's schadenfreude. If it's true, that's poetic. And there's moralizing. If a great man finally lost patience, that means we're watching a fall from grace. That swirl of emotion is exactly what keeps people glued and makes the narrative feel ongoing rather than historical.
Tim, I absolutely believe that Sean Diddy Combs would do things to Brashear Gray. I absolutely believe that Brashear Gray was violated by both of these men. That in itself is a believable narrative to me. Why? Because Brashear Gray right now is online on OnlyFans getting turned out by multiple men, creating this OnlyFans content, trying to create money from it, and etc. So I can even see that taking place. I can imagine somebody being taken advantage of when they're young, being essayed when they're young, and that in itself can lead to problematic, aggressive behaviors, which is why.
So as this gossip web continues to evolve, with new clips, new claims, new retaliatory denials bouncing around feeds, one thing is clear. The narrative isn't over. If anything, the tension is just starting to peak, and the next revelations, whether grounded or sensationalized, will only add fuel to a story that feels, to many followers, like it's still unfolding in real time. And if you think this is just about one alleged outburst, you'd be wrong. And that's when everything started connecting in ways no one wanted to admit. We kept hearing that Denzel's outburst wasn't just emotion, it was realization. People close to him say that after the fight, he looked shaken, not furious, like a man who'd just pieced together something too ugly to ignore. What did he see or hear that flipped the switch? The whispers trace it back to a new round of lawsuits, the kind that don't just stain reputations, they drag entire networks into the light. Suddenly, that story about Will's former assistant didn't feel like a random online meltdown anymore. It felt like a warning that Denzel had tried to pray away and couldn't.
Legal steps, and nothing never happened. Because you know why? I responded to him, and I sent something to the bar letting them know that he told the lie. All right, so let's get off of that. Let's go.
We've all seen how these Hollywood scandals follow the same script. One accusation, then another, then the floodgates. But this time, the dominoes were falling faster. It started with that interview where the ex-assistant, Brother Bilal, claimed to have walked in on something between Will and Dwayne Martin, a claim that was instantly dismissed by Will's reps as completely fabricated, but somehow refused to fade online. Add to that the strange lawsuit filed by the violinist Brian King Joseph, accusing Will and his team of grooming and retaliation on tour, and you start to see the web that Denzel might have walked into. One thread leads to another, and before long, even people inside the industry were asking the same question. How many of these stories can all be coincidences? When we went back through the timeline, it looked like Denzel's faith in Will was cracking long before the alleged fight. Friends say that Denzel started keeping distance after those podcasts began making rounds, the ones tying Will's name to freak-off parties, the same kind that have now landed Diddy in federal court. And that's where the story turns from gossip to something darker. You see, Denzel's whole brand is faith, loyalty, legacy. He doesn't mingle with the wild Hollywood set. So when whispers started suggesting that Will wasn't just connected to that circle, but might have hosted some of those infamous after-hours sessions himself, we heard Denzel's reaction wasn't confusion. It was disgust.
On in the political world, but over here in the legal world, when it comes to the Hollywood industry and just actors in music in general, not even just in Hollywood in general, but an interview via Tasha K's channel from Bilal, who is, I believe, Will Smith's ex-best friend, has applied more pressure. And the man has come to bring in the conversation of Brashear Gray and how Brashear Gray was allegedly essayed by Will Smith from the back.
Insiders insist that what broke him wasn't the rumors themselves, but the timing. One week it's a fresh lawsuit against Will for harassment. The next, it's another old associate threatening to drop evidence of hidden behavior. Denzel, the man who once told Will to beware the devil at your highest moment, now realizing that maybe that advice wasn't a metaphor. People around him say he began asking uncomfortable questions. Who else knew? How long it had been going on? Why no one had said a word? And when those questions led him back to people he once trusted, that's when the confrontation happened. Because how do you stand beside someone you suspect may have dragged your name through something this toxic?
I've spoken to him, and without getting into too much attorney-client communication, he is very thankful for support that he's getting. It's a lot. This story has caught the attention of a lot of media, and a lot of people are talking about this, and he's getting a lot of messages, and people are asking him to come on their shows and talk about the case and talk about things that are going on.
We can't ignore how this all ties into the broader storm. The same week Diddy was sentenced for trafficking and corruption, several YouTube insiders began connecting Will's circle to Diddy's network. Brashear Gray, the former Empire star, reportedly preparing to sue both Diddy and Will for emotional trauma tied to freak-off sessions. Nothing filed yet, just whispers and leaks, but it hit the internet like gasoline on fire. Fans began resurfacing clips of Gray calling Will his mentor, back when he was starting out. Then, people remembered that Gray's manager was Charlie Mack, the same man who walked Will into his first acting gig. Suddenly, every connection, every coincidence was starting to look like part of the same pattern. And this is where the energy shifted from scandal to suspicion. We started seeing tweets suggesting Denzel's rage wasn't spontaneous. It was moral. That he confronted Will not because of gossip, but because he'd found out his own name had been used to shield something darker. One insider put it simply, he feels played. They say Denzel believes Will leveraged his respectability to rebuild his image after the Oscar slap, using their friendship as armor, all while hiding what was really happening behind closed doors. If that's true, then that alleged backstage explosion wasn't an argument between colleagues. It was a reckoning between a believer and the man he thinks broke his faith. There's a cruel poetry to it all. The same Denzel who once said, "The only solution was prayer," now standing in silence while Will's legal troubles multiply. The same Hollywood that once treated Will like a comeback story, now pretending not to know him. Behind the scenes, people are quietly unfollowing, canceling appearances, distancing their brands. The same producers who once called him Hollywood's safe bet are suddenly re-evaluating partnerships. No one says it out loud, but the fear is obvious. Nobody wants to be the next name pulled into whatever Denzel might have uncovered. Then came the whispers about evidence. That's the word everyone keeps using. Evidence. Screenshots, recordings, Messages that supposedly tie multiple A-listers to underground gatherings that look a lot like Diddy's parties. No one's seen them, but the threat alone has people sweating. A studio insider told us that calls went out to crisis PR teams the same night those rumors broke. It's cleanup mode, they said. Everyone's pretending it's business as usual, but nobody wants to stand too close to anyone right now. And in that kind of panic, Denzel's silence hits differently. It's not just disapproval, it's withdrawal, as if he's seen the iceberg under the surface and decided to steer away while everyone else keeps dancing on deck.
We all have our individual challenges. It's cliche, money don't make it better. It don't. Fame just magnifies the problems and the opportunities.
And maybe that's the haunting part. Because if you think about it, Denzel doesn't need Hollywood anymore. His name is clean, his career secure, his soul, as his friends put it, untouched. But Will is standing in a storm he can't charm his way out of. With lawsuits multiplying, ex-associates turning on him, and even his spiritual mentor walking away, we're watching a man who once ruled red carpets now fighting to keep his world from collapsing. The tragic part is, he built this empire to look invincible, but now the walls are glass and everyone can see inside. What's happening now feels less like gossip and more like an unraveling. The more we learn, the more the pieces fit together. Not perfectly, but eerily enough to make you wonder if this is how the mighty fall. Not in one explosion, but in 1,000 whispers. And we can't shake the feeling that Denzel's rage that night wasn't just about betrayal. It was about realization. The idea that maybe Hollywood isn't a place touched by the devil, maybe it is the devil's favorite playground. Now people are watching Denzel closely. Every time he skips an event, every quote about spiritual warfare, every tight smile gets dissected like scripture. Meanwhile, Will has gone quiet too. No public outings, no comments on the lawsuit, no denials beyond his rep's boilerplate statements, just silence. And when two men like that go silent at the same time, the internet fills the gap. Theories multiply, hashtags spin, insiders hint at bigger names and sealed documents. It feels like we're all sitting in the dark waiting for the next shoe to drop. And if you think this storm is over, you might want to hold that thought. Because the people we've spoken to say Denzel's done protecting anyone. He's walking away, choosing distance over damage. But what happens if the things he's seen start leaking anyway? What if the truth he's keeping quiet about doesn't stay buried? That's when the real chaos begins. When Hollywood's saints start turning their backs on its sinners, and the secrets they once prayed over start pouring out. So now we're left with one question. What did Denzel discover that night that made him finally lose faith in Will Smith? Was it betrayal, disgust, or something far more sinister? Whatever it was, it's already changing the way people look at both men. Because when even Denzel Washington walks away from you, it's not just a rumor, it's a reckoning. We'll be watching the story as it twists and unravels, because something tells us this isn't the end, not even close. Let us know what you think happened behind those closed doors. Did Denzel really find out the truth, or is Hollywood spinning another illusion to protect its own? Drop your thoughts below, stay alert, and we'll see you next time. Because the next chapter in this saga might be the one that finally blows the lid off everything.